just like a spark that's breaking out. Can't make a stop, can't turn back now. We know that there's no room for doubt. No, we can't turn back now. I see danger in your eyes. They know we'll burn down the night. Coming just like the sunrise. You know that we gonna light it up tonight. We gonna light it up tonight. We gonna light it up just like the sunrise. We gonna light it up now.
Hello. Sorry, I was having a few technical difficulties, and I couldn't tell if the video was playing or not. So anyway, I think it played, and I think we're here. So welcome to the HVAC Guide welcome to the HVAC Guide live show, where we talk about all things HVAC. Tonight we do have a special guest, and I will get to JC in just a moment. We will be answering your questions live. Sometimes we're joined by other pros in the chat who might know answers to questions that I don't. You're not going to get any questions by JC. He's the man, but you know, it's not hard to stump me. Let's be honest. Let's see. A few housekeeping matters. If you happen to be listening to this on a podcast, please click that like and also leave us a review. That helps us out. And then of course, if you're watching us on Facebook or YouTube, please like and share our show. We're trying to grow this. Our content has kind of been suppressed a little bit over the last year, and we have kind of turned a corner, turning things around, and we would appreciate that. And of course, as always, if you're getting any value out of our content, please click that subscribe button. We have more to come. I've got a video launching this week where we literally went to the streets. Sort of like you see some of the, like, I don't know if you ever seen those late night talk shows where they go out on the street and they interview people and it's kind of funny. And so we did some of that, talking about heating and air. So that video should be launching later this week. Make sure you hit that subscribe button to keep up with us. And we appreciate that. Let's get to tonight's guest. Tonight's guest is an expert in the HVAC industry. He brings over 30 years of experience and specializes in the design and commissioning of residential HVAC systems. He's one of the most sought after instructors in the country, with his company covering multiple states from Kansas all the way down to Florida. He's also founder and president of Comfort J Consulting, a new business that offers services providing manual J, S, and D calculations for homeowners who have no other option in many cases. Everyone, please welcome JC Canfield. Let's go. Howdy, sir.
How's your day going?
What's that?
How is your day going? That was
It's going good, man. It's going good. That crowd, they were lined up for you earlier. You know, they heard you were coming, my friend.
Well, that is the best intro I've ever had.
Well, good. Before we get rolling, we've already kind of got a chat that's buzzing. If you're here watching us on the show, say hello. Let us know where you're at in the country. So quick hello to Bob, Brent. Good to see you guys. Gary. We've already kind of got things moving here. Fisher Brown, welcome to the show. And let's see. He says, I just know Carrier, I guess that's Carrier control board costs $700 up. Is it true? That's a loaded question. Some boards are more than that. Would you agree, JC? I mean,
Yeah, if it just depends on what furnace it is and how many there are, and also different contractors pay different prices for different things from carriers.
we're not supposed to say that, are we?
Oh,
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I mean, and then Brad says hello from Oklahoma. Oh, he's one of those people from Oklahoma, JC. Ugh.
yeah, that's one of my cohorts.
Okay. Well, good enough. Well, I do want to say, if anybody sees this, I had a quarrel, a problem for the longest time. And that was I had my heating and air business, and we did things a certain way there. And we can get into that, but ultimately, we did not do load calculations at our company. We always required them in certain situations, but I had a guy, and we would refer him. And it was just simple enough. And I got early on, I got that set up. Right. And then fast forward, I started doing YouTube content, and hey, Jordan Penn from Ontario. Good to see you. He's been on our show before. But anyway, I started making YouTube content, and what I found was I was telling all these people across the country, all these homeowners, hey, you need to get a load calculation. Like, you're on step 10. You haven't even done step 1 yet. And the problem became a lot of these homeowners, they don't have any other, they have contractors coming out. They're using rule of thumb, if that, calculations. If that's probably not even the right word. They're just throwing mud on the wall, it seems, at times. Oh, I've been doing this for 20 years, so I know what size goes in here. And then these homeowners, they have no other choices. They've just got to settle at times. And anyway, I met JC. Sorry, I'm being long-winded here, but we were at a class. We met each other a couple months ago, and he's like, well, I provide that. I have that service, and I can provide that. And so we did a video on it. That's something that we've actually helped a few folks. I know you've had some conversations and helped some homeowners already. And so, first of all, thank you for stepping in, because that's a huge need in our industry. And I think the other thing was, I trust you, right? I've met a lot of sharks in our industry, just like any other industry probably. And I was like, here's a guy that I know he's going to be honest. He's going to take care of people, and so on. So I don't know if you want to speak to any of that. I don't know if you want to talk about kind of where we came, how we started with that and where we're going with that. But I just think that I wanted to lead with that, because I think it's huge that's now when someone comes on my channel and they say, I can't get a load calculation done anywhere else, now they can.
Oh, certainly, especially for homeowners, because I'm finding that that's a service that contractors just don't provide. Number one, probably because they're smart enough to know that they don't do it and they're not going to do it well, so they don't do it, or that they just don't feel like they need to do that for a homeowner before they replace a heating and air conditioning system. But they're stuck in a way of thinking that a 3-ton air conditioner from 1990 is the same 3-ton air conditioner of today, and that is not accurate at all. So compressors are different, fan motors are different, duct systems, they do become obsolete over a certain amount of time. There's just so much that goes into the comfort of a home, and you can't be 100% sure unless you perform a manual J load calculation and a manual S selection of the air conditioning equipment.
So what would you say, JC, to those contractors? Now, we're not here trying to pick any fights here. We're just trying to set the record straight here. What would you say to those contractors that say, look, I've been doing this forever. I know how to just look at a house and I know what size goes in there. What would you say to that?
Well, it'd be like looking at a speedometer that doesn't work. How do you know how fast you're going or what you're doing? The air conditioning equipment of today, there are so many changes, and we don't really have a 4-ton air conditioner anymore. They're all really light 3.5 or really heavy 3.5 tons. So if you think you're getting putting a 4-ton high efficiency air conditioner in and you're getting 4 tons out of it, 9 times out of 10, if you're not following the procedure, putting the right coil, making sure all the ductwork and the returns are right, you're not going to get 4 tons of air conditioning out of that machine. So,
yeah. James says, does sizing a system by square footage of a home something of the past?
Well, it's never been correct.
Yeah, it's not just it's not a thing of the past. It's a thing that should have never been. It's something that you read on these websites that, I don't know who's making these websites, but they'll say, oh, it needs to be. Actually, I know of one company that has a lot of DIY stuff that puts crap like that out. But anyway, we're not going to talk about them tonight. We're not going to talk about them.
Yeah. So here's the thing. So a 1,200 square foot house in Yuma, Arizona, or Pampa, Texas, might be pretty close, but that same 1,200 square foot house in Ontario is going to be completely different. And in that case, all 3 of those will have a different size air conditioner and a different size heater.
I'll go one step further on that, because we have houses in our area, same area of Virginia, and a 1,200 square foot house built 30 years ago with, 2x4s for the exterior walls and insulation in the attic that is lower than the joists themselves and all that. And then you got a 1,200 square foot house right next to it that was built last year with 2x6 exterior walls and very high R value, insulation, double pane windows, you name it. It's very tight home. 1,200 square foot is not the same, right? Some houses have 7-foot ceilings and some houses have vaulted 25-foot high ceilings. Square footage, you cannot go by that.
Now, if you could determine cubic feet pretty easily, that might be a little closer, but it's still not going to be accurate. So load calculation is the way to do it.
So I did put in the chat where folks can fill out a form, and I'll also put it in the show notes for anybody that sees this in the future. But they can click that link, put their information in, and then you will help them. And now you're going to need some things from them, some information, but you'll do a proper load calculation that is, again, not just something that's fly by night. It's something that they could literally, if need be, take to a local inspector or a municipality that is policing this stuff and be able to show them with real math, this is the size system that should be in my home.
Yes, absolutely. And there's more and more municipalities that are asking for that because, they get so many complaints after they go and inspect a house, and then 6 months later, the air conditioner doesn't work for the homeowner, and they say, you guys inspected this. So, there's been more and more of that going on as the industry has come through time. So
very cool. So I kind of put the cart before the horse. Normally I get to the meat and potatoes later in the show, but I wanted to lead with that because I think it's so huge. And honestly, I get excited to know that I finally can fill that void, that problem for folks. But let's go back to the beginning and maybe give us a snapshot of a young JC Canfield and how you got to be where you're at now. How did you even why HVAC? How about that?
Well, so I originally thought that I wanted to be a chef, so I went to culinary school.
Really?
Yeah. But as it turns out, I'm not a very good cook. And then I've tried a few other things, but my aunt and uncle owned a heating and air conditioning company. And so I went to live with them, and I spent my summers there because my mom is a surgeon and she was a single parent. So I spent my summers with them. I was kind of too big and rambunctious to be around the little kids all the time. So, my uncle would take me with him, and I would go, and they would let me crawl under houses and do stuff with power tools and stuff like that. And so I got into heating and air conditioning that way. And after, you know, I've done everything that you can think of. I worked in the oil field. I worked in, I trimmed trees for a while, climbing trees. But when the babies started showing up, I had to find a career, and I got back into heating and air conditioning, and I embraced it at that time. And so for about the last 25 years, I've been I've just been doing everything I can, learning everything I can. And I've worked for really great contractors. I used to work for Bob Townsend, and he was an amazing contractor here in Tulsa. And he saw something in me, and he put me into Manual J S&D classes, one-on-one classes with the number one guru in our town, which was Dave Stevenson. And then I had one-on-one classes with him, and then they got me hooked up on RightSoft. I spent a bunch of time with Alex Meany, going to a couple of his classes. And at that time, he was still working in tech support, so I was calling him a lot. And then they put me in sales, and I excelled in sales. And we had one of the best installation departments in the state. I would put it up against anybody at that time versus now. So, and I just kept on going. And then I started, because I'm an introvert just like you, I started going to networking meetings and groups, and where you were forced to get up and talk. I remember the first time I had to do that. It was just awful.
Same.
Yeah. But so I went and I forced myself to do those things. And that's how I ended up being able to, be on camera with you here today and talk about Manual J load calculations, or just about anything you might want to talk about in heating and air conditioning too.
I would bet, as awkward as your first one may have been, I bet I could top it. I had a guy, I had lost my job, and so I'm jobless, and he drags me to this BNI meeting and has me get up in front of all these people and basically say, I'm unemployed. If you are hiring. It was bad.
Well, it's those stepping outside of your comfort zone, and doing the hard thing is usually the best way to go. So
yeah,
doing the hard thing and failing forward. That's figuring out how to fail and fail forward at the same time. That's what sets you apart from everybody else.
Definitely. Let's see. I think one thing that would be fun to talk to you about is, because I know we talked when we met in Texas, we talked a little bit about this, and that's the fact that our industry is changing so fast, and all the technology, not just technologies we have today that we didn't have, say, 15 or 20 years ago, but technologies that are coming. I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit, but what a crazy industry we are in sometimes.
Yeah, it's so strange. So there's been more change in the last 5 years than there was in the previous 20 years. We would change, like we'd get a new SEER rating, and then, well, 410A came along. That was pretty early in my career, but that wasn't that big of a deal. It just kind of, they like for 5 or 6 years, 10 years even, they still had R22 equipment and 410A equipment. So, I mean, I was even in sales. I made it through, being an installer, being a technician, and I made it into sales, and I can still sell R22 air conditioning equipment, And so we never really, it wasn't really embraced all the way. And then now we went up to, shortly after that, they went to 13 SEER, and then, 14.3 with SEER 2. And then now we're going with a refrigerant change. And that's all happened in the last 5 years. And on top of that, the industry has had inverters for quite some time. Trane had an inverter late 90s, early 2000s. But it was this monster air conditioner that had these big giant blue capacitors in it and contactors and a variable speed compressor. But that wasn't really kind of like an inverter board like we have now, like an inverter drive. But now everybody that has air conditioning equipment has an inverter. A lot of companies are adding that side discharge unit into their lineup. And it's just amazing to me, how much technology has progressed in just the last 10 years for heating and air conditioning equipment. We've got furnaces, we've got modulating furnaces that can be just as much modulating as your air conditioner can modulate, like on an inverter. We have all kinds of great stuff available, but what our industry has failed at is training technicians to work on this, because this stuff is so new. Most of the manufacturers, refuse to go back to basics and remind folks of the basics. They think you should already have all the basics, and then all of a sudden all you should be able to do is read this manual and you should be able to install this air conditioner or fix this unit. And it's just not that easy. I wish it was. And then every brand does it a little different. So if you've worked on 5 different brands this month, and then you have to remember that this one brand does it this way and that brand does it that way, it makes it pretty confusing for the technicians.
Yeah, I've been surprised on that front. I literally had a guy I was helping on my website, New HVAC Guide, the other day, and he was saying that he was gathering quotes and none of the companies would give him a quote, even though he was asking for it for an inverter system. And he literally said, one of the guys said, it's new technology and I will never learn it. Like I won't do it. I have no motivation to, and I never will. And I was like, it's one thing to, because I've had conversations with folks and, almost debates at times on whether it makes sense. Because let's be honest, there are times when maybe it doesn't make sense to do the extra investment. If you're going to sell the house next month, put the cheapest system in there you can, unless it's going to add to the value of the home, right? I mean, that's kind of rough math. But the attitude of some folks to just say, and I know this isn't just HVAC, but just in general, for him to say, I don't want to. I don't want to learn new technologies. I don't want to be the best at what I do. And I'm like, I'm not with you on that. I can't get on board with that attitude.
Yeah. It's kind of tough. It's about fear of the unknown and fear of what's new, so there's been so much come at contractors. So much change has come at contractors over the last 5 years, from blower motors, refrigerants, SEER 2, all of this stuff gets really tough to keep up with. So, and all that change at once, it makes people afraid to do business, especially when, you hear of people having like problems. They set a unit and then all of a sudden they can't go back and work on it because they don't know anything about it.
Yeah. Yep. I'm trying to pull up. So I don't know if you've seen this or not, but let's see. I'm trying to pull it up without sharing my my work email. And I'm falling short at the moment. I've got a picture of a data plate on an air handler, and
Yeah.
I'm sure because you're way smarter than me. But they're now putting the minimum area square footage for that air handler for what it can supply. And I had not heard that covered in A2L classes
Okay.
that I had been in.
Oh, so yeah, that's a failure of my own not explaining that to people as well. So basically what that's saying is you must that's the minimum amount of area that air handler can serve. Okay, so that takes into consideration the duct and the room that it's in for the mitigation system, because it has a certain amount of refrigerant in there. If it's in a room or an area like your duct system that's lower than that 270 square foot, you can get over the lower flammability limit, which I'm sure homeowners aren't really going to understand that, where you might possibly cause a problem.
Sorry, so James was in my class today. James, you do not have to be paying me money, dude. He just paid me $20, and really cool guy. He was in our class today, the A2L class that I taught today, and he's over here throwing super chats. So thank you very much for that. Very, very much appreciated. Anyway, that's totally threw me off my game here, seeing that come through. But yeah, so back to the air handler. So I actually had a contractor ask me about it, and it was the first time I had been asked. And if I'm being honest, I called a few OEM reps, and I actually got 3 different answers. And they were talking about the breathability of the system, but I think ultimately it boils down to, like you said, I mean, because we did not see these requirements with 410A, although maybe it should have been on there. I know it's an A1 refrigerant, but even a dense amount of leaking refrigerant in a small area, well, that still could be a hazard to breathing it in or whatever. But as I understand it, they're basically saying the area can be no smaller than this because it's an A2L refrigerant. And if it is, then you need to be bringing in some ventilation or doing something about it. Thoughts?
Yeah, but it's basically they're taking into consideration the area of the duct and the room. So that's the smallest amount of area that if it had a major leak and filled up the whole area with refrigerant, where it could be a problem. So like, even with a closet, you have combustion air. I mean, unless it's a sealed combustion furnace. So there's different municipalities and different types of systems will probably require different mitigation strategies. So like if you were in a really tight closet and say your suction line popped off of your coil and you blew all that refrigerant into a little closet and it was sealed because it was a sealed combustion furnace, and the customer was like, oh, I don't want to see anything from the attic or anything like that, so everything's pretty tight. And then you could possibly, in that closet, if there was a very high energy spark or a very hot flame, could potentially have a problem. But it's highly unlikely. But to make sure that doesn't happen, like a municipality might say something like, well, if you need a refrigerant sensor in this closet with an exhaust fan, in the closet, but it can't be a shaded pole exhaust fan. You have to have a variable speed exhaust fan, with a sealed motor, those kind of things. But we haven't gotten there yet. And I don't think we're going to get there until there's accidents and problems. And if there are no accidents and no problems, we may not ever get there.
I don't think we will, not in residential. I mean, yeah. And the only reason I say that is I have a good friend of mine does heating and air over in Europe, over in the UK, and they've been using R32 for years. It's no big deal. It's another day at work for them. And do I think we need to be serious and safe? Absolutely. But do we need to be fearful? I say no.
No.
I think you're talking about a very odd, rare situation that something maybe just could happen. But I think at the end of the day, these systems are going to have refrigerant sensors. They are going to circulate air. They'll go into mitigation if they do sense a refrigerant leak. And that area, my only quarrel with that is that, well, let me say this. 270 square feet for a 3.5 ton air handler, unless it's a server room, you know, you're never going to see a 3.5 ton installed in residential, in a, you know, supplying a space that's only 270 square feet, unless they didn't do a proper load calculation with JC. But the other thing I'll say on that is, if everything, you know, if it's installed properly and it's sized properly for the space, it's going to go into mitigation. It's going to pull fresh air through there, not fresh air from the sense of ventilation, unless you have ventilation installed, but just from the sense of diluting that refrigerant, right?
Yeah. But specifically on that part of the sticker, they're talking about the surface area of the duct and the room that it's attached, the rooms that it is attached to. You see what I'm saying? So, you know, you have, so if you took all your ducts and you added it all together and you've got all your equivalent feet in your surface area of your duct system, you could, with math, turn that into a square footage. So that's what they're talking about. So this is how much square feet of duct space in this system. This is the smallest it can be.
Okay.
So
this is the fourth different answer I've gotten. So you're saying it also has to do with the sizing of the ductwork itself.
Yeah, because your coil is attached to a duct system.
Right.
So that's what that's speaking to. Because I mean, very few people are going to just set an air handler out in a room and run it. And they're definitely not going to put a 3.5 ton on only a 275 square foot, unless it was like 25 or 30 feet tall and it was all windows. You know what I mean?
Well, so that actually does raise a point, right? So we just talked about earlier how square footage should not be the reason, the only factor in sizing an HVAC system, and yet we've got an air handler here that says that the rooms need to be a certain amount of square feet. Well, again, not all square footage is created equal. So teach me on that.
Well, so I don't think I'm explaining it very well. So this is really speaking to the mitigation system of the air handler in the amount of refrigerant that is in the system versus how many square feet of this container of refrigerant, if it was to release all of its contents, where it could be a problem and get under the LFL, the lower flammability limit.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see what I'm saying? Does that make any better sense? Am I explaining that well?
I think you're explaining it just fine. What I'm saying is, shouldn't that say how much cubic feet there should be as a minimum? What square footage should be? We've already determined that not all square footage is created equal. What am I missing?
I don't think it should be on there personally. So, but the government made them put it on there. So basically what's going to happen, most likely some inspector that hasn't gotten enough training is going to see that and say, and they're going to go to like the smallest room in the house and they're going to measure the smallest bathroom and say, oh, this is only 50 square feet. And all of a sudden, this is not the right system for the house. This is something that that a contractor is going to run up against, and we're going to have to solve for them. As
not just that, I've already had the question, and I can imagine the confusion in the future coming on the. I can't believe we've gone down this rabbit hole, but I had every intention of bringing this up when I received that picture yesterday.
Yeah,
but I was like, I'm going to talk to JC about this on the live show. I've lost my train of thought aside from that. Oh, I know what I was gonna say. So the question I received is the square footage there pertaining to the area that the system is located in? Because he's like, well, 270 square feet, the house is only 1,200 square feet, or the house is only 2,000 square feet, or whatever. And I was like, no. If
It
you were going to put it in
specifically
the attic, you can still put it in the attic.
it specifically speaks to the container of the refrigerant and what all, like the duct system, and yeah, it specifically speaks to that. So, if you think about it, if it is in a closet or if it is in an attic, it's going to be fine there based on that calculation. But no, it specifically speaks to the duct system is the way I understand it. And I can find out tomorrow I'm wrong. So,
well, like I say, I mean, I talked to several OEMs reps from different companies. And I talked to 3 different ones, and I literally received 3 different answers. So,
I've never seen a 270 square foot mechanical closet that only had one air conditioning system in it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I've seen some pretty large mechanical rooms, but even still 300 square feet. I mean, that's
a dream. That is a dream. So
amen.
You got a 1,200 square foot house and you gave me 300 square feet of mechanical room to work with. I love you.
I love you right now.
Yeah. So
that's funny. Fair enough. I thought that was an interesting conundrum, and it also makes me wonder what else we haven't seen that may be coming, these decisions that are being made and so on. What is your favorite thing about what you do or what we do?
Really, honestly, HVAC has been so good to me throughout the years, except for like short periods of time. And so the company I work for, Johnstone Supply, has given me the opportunity to give back to the industry by filling a gap in training for people that just didn't get it, or they have gaps in their education. And really, honestly, my favorite thing is being able to give back and be as selfless as I can be with people. So, and not being a manager is amazing. That is not having, employees that report to me is amazing, and not dealing with like personal issues for people and stuff like that. I never felt like I ever did a good job at that. And yeah, it's being able to give back is probably the most important thing, because I've had plenty of setbacks in my career, some self-inflicted and some not self-inflicted. They just happen. Yeah. So those setbacks, but getting in and being tenacious and doing trying every chance you get, failing forward as much as possible, and being able to give back to the industry is probably the most important thing to me. Because everybody out there deserves somebody to help them, because somebody helped me more than once. So
yeah. Emery asks the same question, the number one question that a lot of homeowners ask when they meet an expert in our industry. And he asks, what brand do you sell or do you like?
Oh, my favorite brand? Wow. I don't know if I'm supposed to answer that. I bleed blue. It's Daikin. I love their stuff.
You can definitely answer it then. They're our biggest sponsor.
It's such they're always the innovators. They're the largest company in the world. They always have a target on their back, and they're doing things. I mean, they've got stuff coming out like inverter package units, a VRV package unit, VRF package unit. They're the ones that are doing the things that everybody else is afraid to try. And a lot of people are just copying the things that they are doing. So,
well, they invented VRV, or as other companies call it, VRF technology. So, yeah, I actually don't police that. So I've had other guests on our show and they've talked about other brands that they like for one reason or another, but I it's pretty rare for me to a lot of, and I'm not saying all, but a lot of those folks, when I asked them, I remember interviewing a guy for a job interview years ago, and he said, well, I really like this brand. And I said, oh, okay. I said, well, have you ever installed any other brand? Well, no. It's because I like this brand. The company I work for, that's the brand they sell, and it's the only brand I've ever installed. I was like, okay. To me, that's not a good enough reason for me. And then, so for me, I tried multiple brands at my company before I found Daikin, and I believe everything you said as well. It didn't take long after installing a few of them to say things are a little different over here.
Yeah, no, I was train washed for a significant time in my career. And
Yeah, same.
So, when they started coming out with high efficiency air conditioners, and they would go up in efficiency and the cost would go up, but I found that these air conditioners started putting out less and less BTUs. And this is true of all manufacturers, not just Trane. So let me be fair here. But the higher the efficiency you went, the lower the amount of BTUs the darn thing put out. And like often I would have a little bit of trouble getting my manual S to come to come in line. So, the longer that you spend looking at air conditioning equipment and their actual capacities at temperatures, you start to realize that, hey, this guy's system, if I go even with the highest efficiency unit, I have to go to another size, and it's going to be less efficient than it was before. In some cases, that doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. So,
yeah. Well, let's take a quick break. We have a segment that on our show that we call the Goofy Inventions segment, and JC told me he's got two, and you guys are in for a treat. 2 Goofy Inventions. Okay, JC, let's get to it. Goofy inventions. Let's first of all, are they actually goofy, or are you about to rock our world with some awesome invention?
Well, I don't know. So those of us that go out and measure houses and do load calculations. So I've often wished I had a little drone that had a scanning technology, and it could tell me the insulation in the walls, and it could tell me the insulation in the ceiling, and it could tell me the or the U value and the solar heat gain coefficient from the windows just by the sun shining on a sensor, and measure everything, and then throw me a 3D picture of everything that I need to look at. That would be an amazing thing. But number 2 is have you ever played the game of life?
Yeah, it's been a long time, but yes.
Okay, so Milton Bradley put that game together, and what he did was it was about becoming a good citizen, and when you win the game because you're a good citizen. Well, we actually need a game of life, something similar for heating and air conditioning businesses, because I found that you really need to train a lot of people in how to do heating and air conditioning business, because I hear of a lot of things. There was a contractor not very long ago in our office talking about how he only charged $80 an hour. So, and he had employees. So,
I like that. That's unlike any other answer, any other goofy invention I've ever heard.
Yeah, Milton Bradley was a genius, and he really wanted to get into educating children, and he wanted to do it with games. So if we could figure out how to gamify heating and air conditioning business with a board game, or even a video game, would be amazing, and have it to where we teach people how to run a business. Dispatching. This customer calls in with this complaint, and then oh my gosh, it flooded in this neighborhood because you ran this dice, but you still have to get to the customer's call. That kind of stuff.
It's kind of like those simulator games.
Yeah.
So when I was younger, I think you can still do it, but I used to do it, years ago more. And I don't know how to describe it because it sounds goofy to older folks. But I would watch other people play video games. So like they would live stream it, and I never like it's not like I was sitting on the edge of my seat and I was watching every little thing. It was more like ASMR, like background, like if I was working on something, I would just put that on because it was ongoing, and so some of those gamers will play games like they'll drive big 18-wheeler trucks, tractor trailers, or there's one now of farming, like they'll farm. And
Yeah.
I'm like, man, do you know if you did those things in real life, you would actually get money for those
Yeah.
things? Like uh and it would be probably just as fun.
So I don't know if you've priced the combine in a while, but those things are not cheap. And then the property, and then the getting the stuff to grow and the water to make it grow, and relying on the sun and the rain. So, you know, that kind of stuff.
You Debbie Downer.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, I hear you. I think that's interesting. The drone thing I think is really interesting because I will tell you that I have less of a problem now because I've learned more and I understand more and I understand that there's a method to the madness. But I will say when I started learning this trade and I started learning what load calculations were and all of that, part of my issue with them was there are times when there is a guess or two being made even with that. And your drone may help with some of that.
Well, so a load calculation is really ultimately it's just a picture of the proposed worst day that the house is going to see. But at the same time, it is the best day the air conditioner is going to see because it's based on numbers from when it was brand new.
Hmm.
So, so, and a load calculation, if everything's covered up and there's no window stickers and we don't have any information and you didn't see it from a plan to studs, a load calculation on a residential existing home is a very, very good educated guess on the sensible and latent heat that the house gains and loses. So,
Yeah. Yep. So, having that drone might even, especially with temperature sensors and knowing what the actual R value of certain things are, maybe it would alleviate even some of the guessing on that front. But no, I hear you. It's so precise now that even getting it even more precise, I don't know at the end of the day whether whether a wall is, you know, one R value or six. I don't know what the verbiage is, but six R values higher. If it would really change the size, if both scenarios you're going to go with a 2.5 ton system, then maybe it's not that big of a deal. But I would think that there probably are some homes where, especially a larger home, and you start to really compound all the different measurements that are guesses, and it could really matter.
oh yeah. So especially if say they built a pretty nice house in the 70s with with the best stuff they had at the time. And then so in the 90s or the early 2000s or even 5 years ago, they did an add-on. That you would have a lot of what they call zone diversity. So you may have like double the square footage, but this square footage that was built this way has a higher tonnage than the new square footage that was built this way. So
Got
and
it.
might even have more volume. So it gets pretty wild. That zone diversity can be it can be a nail biter sometimes. So
Yeah. Yeah.
there are load calculations that I've done on homes where I've prayed over every BTU. So
Um, I do want to stop for a second and say Gary has been sharing some interesting stuff in the chat. And Gary, I would love to. So next week on our live show, I'll be flying solo again. And if you do find something, I'd love to chat more and hear more about these things you're talking about. But this week it's all about JC, and I did, there's a lot of things floating around out there, right? Good, not necessarily bad things always, right? I mean, sometimes some of these things, the right person have lunch with the right person, and I think that our trade, although it sometimes appears that different companies are trying to bury one another, at the end of the day, a lot of them are still, having conversations behind closed doors, and sometimes that's where some of the best collaboration and technologies come from. But anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent. JC, what is the biggest horror story that you could share with us? What's the craziest horror story that you've run into in your career?
Oh wow. There's plenty of those. So, a lot of the standard ones that you hear about, going into somebody's house and seeing 300 cats, and those have happened more than once. But I walked into a very
Talking about my
expensive.
mom? You talking about my mom?
No, I was not talking about your mom. I walked into a house about 3 or 4 years ago with a brand new home. They had built it with foam, and the mixture was incorrect, and it smelled like cat pee throughout the whole entire house. And there was moisture buildup everywhere in the house, and so they ended up cutting the roof off of this person's house and putting a new roof on it, and then taking out the foam insulation that was in the roof, because luckily they didn't put foam in the walls, they just put it on the ceiling. But they used a very cheap contractor to do the foam, and the mixture was wrong, or they had bad foam. Nobody really knew what the answer was, but they went out there, cut the roof off, pulled it off with a crane, put it on the ground, and chopped it up and put it in a dumpster, and started building a new roof for those folks. So, and that contractor lost a pretty good. The general contractor lost a pretty good amount of money, and the air conditioning wasn't sized right, and they had a bunch of duct leakage, so everything smelled horrible in that house, and there was mold growing everywhere. It was awful. So,
Ugh.
I've seen that. I've seen mold grow. We're not really supposed to say mold in our industry because we're not mold experts, but it's not proven and tested to be mold until it's proven and tested to be mold. But we know what it looks like, and we know what it is. So
James wants to know if you remember the super cool slide rule.
yes, they have Super Cool they have an app now that you can use. You have to pay for it.
They do.
You have to pay for it though. So, but if you've got a modern set of gauges and modern tools, superheat, subcooling, and dew point and bubble point charging, which is going to be a thing with those poor folks with 454B equipment, but your modern set of gauges will take care of that for you. You just have to remember to put all the probes in the right place.
Yeah. Speaking of 454B, I have been amazed by how much bad information is getting thrown around. I'm used to folks being mistaken and making a mistake on something, right? I do that all the time. I'll say, you should turn this screw left when maybe you should turn it right. But I've been amazed at how much misinformation is out there. Things like these refrigerants have propane in it, which they don't, right?
Right. R32 is a difluoromethane.
Yeah. Single component.
Single component refrigerant. Yeah.
Not blended.
R32 has been carrying the industry for a long time because it's 50% in 410A. Everybody's already been working with it. They just didn't quite realize it. The other part of that refrigerant is a fire retardant. I can never remember what the other part of that refrigerant is, and I don't know why.
125.
125. Yeah. And then
which is a horrible refrigerant. It's got horrible heat transfer. It's got a very high GWP. Yeah. It's a horrible refrigerant.
But so with R32 and R20 R1234YF, They're already using it in cars, but then you read the stuff about the PFAs that separate from it when it gets up into the atmosphere. The questions I have is this going to do that in somebody's house? Is it, what, and then you read how bad polyfluoroalkyl substances are for humans. You just are like, wow. So, it's so either way, this is our life now. And it really doesn't matter because both refrigerants perform about the same. So the pressures are just different and the amount of refrigerant is going to be different. So I'm not worried about the industry either way. But what I'm worried about is that poor guy that sends his helper out to the truck and he says, give me the bottle with the red stripe on it. And he comes back with the wrong refrigerant and you're tired and it's hot outside and it's Friday night and you're on your 87th call that week and you can barely see straight, but you're going to take care of these people tonight and you're popping some refrigerant in and you put the wrong refrigerant in somebody's air conditioner and you sell it out for them.
It's my biggest quarrel with all of this because gone are the days of pink jugs and blue jugs and green jugs. Both of these refrigerants will have the red stripe. They'll both be a light gray, off-white looking color. And we all know, I mean, we know that nobody ever makes a mistake. Nobody on this show would ever make this mistake, right? Nobody that ever sees this video. But that's not who we're talking about. We're talking about, that helper you just hired, that only has 2 months of experience and he's not really paying attention and he goes and doesn't actually read the side of the tank or the box and puts the wrong refrigerant in there.
Yeah, I've never made the mistake, but I've almost done it a lot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I was like, oh, wait, this was R22 and I've already drugged this 410A bottle all the way around to the air conditioner. I've done that more than once. I'll admit to that. Mistakes. We're nothing without our mistakes. I rely on correction and learning from my mistakes. So I wouldn't be where I have if I haven't made a whole bunch of mistakes. Experience, unfortunately, comes from making mistakes. So
especially with all those labels that get bleached in the sun and you're trying to figure out what refrigerant actually is in it or supposed to be in it. And the other flip side of that coin is what about the last guy? Here you are trying to get the refrigerant right and the pressures are wonky and is it non-condensables? Did they accidentally put R22 in this 410 system? Like what is going on here? It's part of the deal, I guess.
Well, now, so since at first when we did a lot of recovery and they were weird about mixing refrigerants and stuff like that, and they charged a whole bunch if you sent a recovery bottle back that had mixed refrigerants in it, because they had to figure out how to get it disposed and they had to pay for that. And then they would mark that up and charge you for that. Now they've kind of loosened up on that with R22 and 410A. I've heard, I don't know, it's still a bad idea. This is a really bad idea for anybody to mix refrigerants in any kind of recovery bottle or recovery machine. I was reading in the installation instructions from another brand last week, and they said once you've used a refrigeration tool with our unit, we want only that tool to be used with R454B. And basically, that's what the verbiage said. It was like, we only want this set of R454B gauges used with this system.
Yeah. Yep. Well, we're going to wrap up here shortly, but if you're watching us, don't go anywhere yet. I've got one more question for JC that I think is a huge question that may actually change everything for you guys. But before we get to that question, I want to just say a couple things. The first thing is I will be back, as always, next Tuesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific. I do have a couple Tuesdays coming up in the near future where we will not be having our show, and I will put in the community tab on our YouTube channel and on our Facebook page what weeks those are. But next week isn't one of them. And so, make sure you're here next Tuesday. That said, before I ask JC this huge question, I want to say to everyone in the chat that we know there's some bad apples, right? There's some posers, there's some wannabes There's some sharks and scammers all in our trade, and they make us all look bad. We all know that. That said, we also know there's some good apples in our trade. And if you know a good apple, if you know a good heating and air company, a good plumbing company, or a good electrical company, drop their name in the chat and where they're located. And we're going to do a couple things. We're going to show them some love. We're going to highlight them on the screen. But the other thing we're going to do is you may actually send some business their way. You never know if someone in your area might happen to see your comment, and you might actually be able to show that company a little more than some love. So drop those companies in the chat. We will highlight them. And JC, while they're doing that, I'm going to ask you the final question. And that is, whoever your closest family member is that does not live with you. So whoever that is, if they're in the market for a heating and air system tomorrow and they call you for some advice, what's the advice you're going to give them?
Well, so first of all, I'm going to ask him what their main goal is. Or do they want to be very, very comfortable, and what is their budget? And based on their budget is how much they want to spend retail, because they're going to have to pay retail. I'm going to tell them that, well, you need to up your budget. You're going to want to finance it, and you're going to want to go with either the Daikin 20 SEER or the high efficiency fit. That's what I'm going to tell them. And they need a load calculation, but probably I've already done it for them. So
I think I'm required, since we've talked about Daikin a couple of times on our show. Daikin is a sponsor of our YouTube channel. They sponsor quite a bit of our content. But I will say this, Daikin has not paid you to say anything you've said about them tonight. Is that correct?
No. Daikin doesn't pay me. The company I work for sells Daikin equipment to contractors, and they didn't ask me to do anything like this. And if they asked me, I'd be glad to do it. But no, Daikin is some great stuff, and they're really moving the industry forward, and they're trying to do a lot of things to make homes more comfortable. So
I like it. Well, good enough. Well, thanks for being on our show, man. I hope that, we can have you on again, maybe in the future as things continue to grow. I do want to drop in the chat one last time, if you are in the market for a heating and air system and you need a manual J, S, or D calculation done, JC is the man. He knows what he's doing. He doesn't cut corners. He does it right. And I'm actually trying to pull that link up now. Here it is. To where you can, you can click that link, put your information in there, and you can get a load calculation done with JC. So that said, thanks for being here, man. This was fun. I feel like I learned some tonight, and I'm sure everyone that was on the chat learned some things as well.
Well, awesome. Thank you. Thanks for having me, and I'll be glad to come on anytime you want.
Okay, awesome. Good enough. All right. Well, for the rest of you, I'll be back next Tuesday night. In the meantime, make it a great week. We'll see you then.